Not everyone who's close to you is truly your friend. A waitress warned a millionaire about this, and what happened the next day will leave you speechless. But before we dive into the story, drop a comment below about where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey, everyone. The luxurious aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the soft hum of conversations in the upscale cafe. It was a day of triumph, a moment to celebrate. David Sullivan, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, adjusted his cufflinks as he soaked in the vibrant yet calming atmosphere. Beside him, his best friend and business partner, Ryan, seemed equally excited. They were on the brink of closing the deal of a lifetime, one that promised to cement their company as a leader in the industry and their financial security for years to come. But beneath the polished surface, the seeds of betrayal were quietly taking root. "Ryan, I'll be back in a minute," David said, standing from the mahogany table. Ryan gave a distracted nod, his eyes glued to his phone. David strolled toward the restroom, unaware that the next few minutes would shake the very foundation of his life. While David was gone, Ryan leaned back in his chair, his face splitting into a sly smile. He picked up his phone, lowered his voice, and began speaking. "Everything's ready," Ryan whispered, his words dripping with malice. "David has no clue. The moment the deal is signed, the company and all its assets will be mine. He'll never see it coming." A few steps away, Emily, a young waitress who had been refilling water glasses at their table, froze in place. Her heart skipped a beat as she caught every word of Ryan's sinister plan. Emily had worked at the cafe for months, serving wealthy patrons with practiced indifference. But this was different. She stared at Ryan, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the water pitcher. The man David trusted most in the world was planning to rob him of everything he had built. Retreating to the kitchen, Emily paced back and forth. "What do I do?" she muttered under her breath. She wasn't supposed to interfere. Her job was to serve and stay invisible. But could she really stay silent, knowing what she did? As she debated, David returned to the table, oblivious to what had transpired. Ryan greeted him with a grin, masking the treachery behind his friendly demeanor. Emily watched from a distance, her conscience weighing heavy on her. Her heart told her to act, but fear held her back. What if they didn't believe her? What if this backfired? Gathering every ounce of courage, Emily decided she couldn't walk away. As Ryan stepped outside to take another call, she seized the moment. Her footsteps felt heavier with each step toward David. "Excuse me, sir," Emily said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. David looked up, surprised to see the young waitress standing before him. "Yes, I need to tell you something. It's about your friend," she stammered, glancing nervously toward the door where Ryan had gone. David frowned, his curiosity piqued. "What about him?" Emily hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice trembling but urgent. "I overheard him on the phone. He's planning to betray you. He said once the deal is finalized, he's going to take everything. The company, the assets, everything." David's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? That's impossible. Ryan's my best friend. We've built this business together." "I know it sounds crazy, but I swear I'm telling the truth," Emily insisted, her eyes wide with sincerity. "He's planning to cut you out completely. I heard him say it with my own ears." David sat back, stunned. His instinct was to dismiss her claim. It had to be some kind of misunderstanding. But the look in Emily's eyes gave him pause. She didn't seem like someone who would fabricate such a story. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" David asked, his tone now deadly serious. Emily nodded firmly. "I wouldn't be telling you this if I wasn't." David glanced toward the door, doubt gnawing at his thoughts. Ryan re-entered the cafe moments later, his smile as wide as ever. But David couldn't shake the unease creeping into his chest. Could Emily be right? The celebratory mood had vanished, replaced by a growing sense of dread. David forced a smile as Ryan sat down, pretending. Nothing was amiss, but his mind was racing. He couldn't confront Ryan, not yet. He needed proof. As the minutes passed, David resolved to uncover the truth. He would test Ryan, carefully and strategically. If Emily's warning was accurate, he wouldn't just lose his company. He'd lose the man he considered his brother. The stakes had never been higher. And David, for the first time in years, felt utterly alone. David Sullivan adjusted his cufflinks as he glanced around the opulent cafe. The subtle hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee created a serene atmosphere. But beneath David's calm exterior, a storm brewed. Today was supposed to be a celebration, the culmination of years of hard work. He and his best friend, Ryan, were on the brink of finalizing the biggest deal of their lives, a deal that would elevate their company to the pinnacle of the industry. Yet, something gnawed at David, a strange unease he couldn't shake. "Ryan, I'll be back in a moment," David said, standing from their polished mahogany table. Ryan barely looked up, engrossed in his phone, and gave a distracted nod. David walked toward the restroom, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. Meanwhile, at the table, Ryan's demeanor shifted. His charming smile faded as he leaned into his phone, speaking in a hushed tone. Emily, a young waitress with sharp instincts, approached to refill his water. She hesitated when she heard Ryan's voice, low, deliberate, and unsettling. "Everything's in place," Ryan muttered, his tone cold. "David has no clue. Once this deal is signed, everything will be mine. The company, the assets, it'll all belong to me. He won't even see it coming." Emily froze, her hands trembling as she gripped the water pitcher. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Ryan, the charismatic and polished man she had served countless times, was plotting a betrayal of unimaginable proportions against his best friend. Her heart pounded as she stepped away, retreating to the kitchen. "What should I do?" she thought. She was just a waitress. This wasn't her world. But the thought of someone being blindsided by such a cruel betrayal weighed heavily on her conscience. Moments later, David returned, his face composed but his thoughts scattered. Ryan greeted him with a warm smile, one that masked his dark intentions. Emily watched from a distance, her pulse racing. She had to act. Taking a deep breath, she gathered all the courage she could muster and approached David's table. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice trembling slightly. David looked up, surprised. "Yes, I overheard something you need to know," Emily said cautiously, glancing toward Ryan, who had stepped away to take another call. David frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily hesitated, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Your friend, Ryan. I overheard him talking. He's planning to betray you. He said once the deal is finalized, he'll take over everything and leave you with nothing." David blinked, stunned by her words. "What? That's impossible. Ryan and I have been friends since childhood. Why would he?" "I know it sounds crazy," Emily interrupted, her voice urgent, "but I swear I'm telling the truth. I couldn't just stand by and let you sign that deal without warning you." David studied her face. She seemed sincere, her concern genuine. But this was Ryan, his best friend, the man he trusted more than anyone else. Could it be true? "Thank you," David finally said, his voice quieter now. "I'll handle it." As Emily retreated, David's mind swirled with doubt and disbelief. When Ryan returned, the air between them felt different. David forced a smile, his emotions buried beneath a mask of composure. "Everything okay?" Ryan asked casually, taking his seat. David nodded. "Yeah, just thinking things over." Ryan grinned. "We've worked too hard to let nerves get in the way. Let's finalize this and move forward." David forced another smile. "I'll need a little more time to review everything." Ryan's expression flickered briefly. Was it frustration? Annoyance? It was subtle but enough to deepen David's unease. "Take your time," Ryan said smoothly. "But don't wait too long. Opportunities like this don't come often." David nodded, his decision clear. He wasn't signing anything until he uncovered the truth. Over the next 3 days, David lived in a state of quiet turmoil. Every interaction with Ryan felt like a game of chess, each move calculated. Ryan, ever the charming partner, showed no cracks in his facade, leaving David questioning everything. In the background, David had hired Julian, a seasoned private investigator, to dig into Ryan's financial records and communications. Julian's thoroughness had been invaluable in past business dealings, and now, David needed it more than ever. On the third evening, Julian called. "David," Julian began, his tone serious. "You're not going to like what I found." David gripped his phone tightly. "What is it?" "There's evidence Ryan has been diverting company funds into a private account for months. He's also been in contact with a rival firm. It's clear he's been planning to take over the company once the deal goes through." David's chest tightened. He had suspected betrayal, but hearing it confirmed was like a knife to the heart. The next morning, David arranged a meeting with Ryan at the cafe. This time, there was no celebratory atmosphere, no friendly banter. David sat across from Ryan, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp. "I've been thinking about the deal," David said, sliding the unsigned contract across the table. Ryan smirked. "Finally ready to sign?" "No," David replied firmly, "but I am ready to end this partnership." Ryan's face froze. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything, Ryan," David said, his voice cutting through the air like steel. "The private accounts, the calls with our competitors. You were planning to take everything from me." Ryan's mask of confidence cracked, his face paling. "David, I can explain." "Save it," David snapped, standing up. "You weren't just betraying me. You were destroying years of trust, of friendship. But it ends here." As David walked away, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The pain of betrayal would linger, but he had saved his company, and himself, from ruin. Outside, Emily stood waiting, her face etched with concern. "Did you find out the truth?" she asked. David nodded. "You were right. Thank you for warning me." A small smile spread across Emily's face. "Sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest choice. I'm glad I could help." As David looked at her, he realized that sometimes the most unexpected people come into your life at the perfect moment. And perhaps this was the start of something new. David sat in his office, his thoughts a storm of betrayal and disbelief. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the sprawling cityscape outside his window. But the beauty of the view did little to calm his racing mind. His phone buzzed, snapping him back to the present. "Julian," David said as he picked up the call, his voice tense with anticipation. "I've found something," Julian replied, his tone steady but laced with gravity. "It's not definitive yet, but it's a start." David straightened in his chair, gripping the edge of his desk. "What did you find?" "There are irregularities in Ryan's personal accounts," Julian began. "Small, unexplained transfers to an offshore account over the past several months. It's not illegal on its own, but the timing is interesting. These transfers started right when you two began negotiating this deal." David's heart sank. "How much are we talking?" "Not massive sums individually," Julian said, "but enough to suggest something's being set up. Altogether, it's a few million. I'm still digging, but the pattern is clear. Ryan's been positioning himself for something big. My guess, he's getting ready for a move once this deal goes through." David felt a mix of anger and disbelief. His chest tightened as he leaned back, staring blankly at the ceiling. "Do you think this has anything to do with what Emily overheard?" "It's possible," Julian replied cautiously. "People don't start moving money offshore for no reason. It's usually to hide something, or to prepare for a major change. Whatever it is, it's deliberate." David clenched his jaw, his trust in Ryan unraveling with every word. "Keep digging," he said firmly. "I need proof, solid proof, before I make my move." "You'll have it," Julian promised. As the call ended, David stared at the phone in his hand, his mind swirling with questions. How could Ryan do this? The man he'd called his best friend, his partner, was secretly orchestrating a betrayal so deep it threatened to destroy everything they'd built together. Later that evening, David met Ryan for dinner. It was a routine the two had followed for years, an informal way to catch up and discuss business in a more relaxed setting. But tonight, every word, every glance, felt like a battle of wills. Ryan greeted him with his signature smile, all charm and confidence. But to David, it now seemed like a mask. As they ordered their food, Ryan leaned in slightly, his tone casual. "So," he said, cutting into his steak, "are we moving forward with the deal? Everything's still on track." David took a measured sip of his wine, his face betraying nothing. "I'm still reviewing a few things," he replied calmly. "I want to make sure every detail is perfect before we finalize." For a brief moment, something flickered in Ryan's eyes: impatience, annoyance. It was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by his easy smile. "Of course," Ryan said smoothly. "Take your time. But you know opportunities like this don't wait forever." David nodded, forcing a polite smile. "I know." The rest of the dinner passed without incident, but every word Ryan spoke felt laced with hidden intent. David played along, laughing at the right moments, nodding at the right times, all the while his anger simmered beneath the surface. As they parted ways, David watched Ryan walk away, his silhouette disappearing into the night. The man he had once trusted implicitly now felt like a stranger, a dangerous one. The next morning, David sat in his office, restless and on edge. When his phone rang, he snatched it up instantly, seeing Julian's name on the screen. "What do you have?" David asked, his voice tight. Julian's tone was somber. "It's worse than I thought," he said. "Ryan's been funneling company money into his offshore account carefully, in small amounts, just under the radar. He siphoned off close to $5 million. David's grip on the phone tightened. $5 million, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Julian continued, "And there's more. I found some emails and messages, encrypted, but we managed to decode parts of them. Ryan's been in talks with outside investors, people looking to buy into the company. He's setting himself up for a hostile takeover. Once the deal goes through, he plans to use his shares and the stolen funds to edge you out." David's world seemed to tilt. His closest friend wasn't just betraying him. He was preparing to destroy him. "How long has this been going on?" David demanded. "Over a year," Julian replied. "This has been in the works for a while. Ryan's been playing the long game." David's hand trembled as he ended the call. The betrayal was staggering, but he couldn't afford to let his emotions cloud his judgment. He needed a plan. That evening, as David sat in his dimly lit office, Emily's warning echoed in his mind. She had taken a risk by telling him the truth, and she had been right. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. "David," Emily answered, her voice tentative. "I owe you," David said, his tone sincere. "You were right about Ryan. He's been planning this for a long time." Emily sighed in relief. "I'm just glad you listened." David paused, staring out at the city lights. "I don't know what comes next, but I need to protect what's mine. Thank you for speaking up. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't." Emily's voice softened. "You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think." As David ended the call, a sense of resolve settled over him. Ryan had underestimated him, but that was his first mistake. David wasn't just going to stop him. He was going to make sure Ryan regretted ever crossing him. The room was thick with tension as Ryan sat across from David, the confident smirk he usually wore slowly fading. For years, that smirk had been a sign of camaraderie, of trust, but now it felt like a dagger. Ryan was calculating his next move, but David had cornered him. David clenched his jaw, his voice steady but simmering with restrained anger. "I trusted you, Ryan. We've built this company together, and now I find out you've been siphoning money, making backdoor deals, positioning yourself to take everything. Tell me, how long have you been planning this?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, trying to project calmness, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "David, you're blowing this out of proportion," he said smoothly. "Whatever you think you've discovered, it's not what it looks like." David let out a sharp scoff, his glare cutting through Ryan's facade. "Not what it looks like. I've seen the transfers, Ryan. Millions of dollars. Offshore accounts. And now I find out you've been cozying up to our competitors? This isn't a misunderstanding. This is betrayal." Ryan's face hardened, the charm slipping away like a mask he no longer had the energy to wear. For the first time, his true nature shone through, cold, calculating, ruthless. "All right," he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping its usual warmth. "You want the truth? Fine. Yeah, I've been planning this. And do you know why, David? Because you didn't leave me much of a choice." David's fists clenched. his knuckles white against the edge of the table. No choice. You're trying to justify stealing from me? From the company we built together? Ryan's bitterness spilled over as he leaned closer, his voice sharp. Do you have any idea what it's been like, standing in your shadow, watching you take all the glory while I'm stuck doing the dirty work? We started this company together, but you've always been the golden boy, the one everyone praises, the one everyone looks up to. Meanwhile, I'm the one keeping everything afloat, and what do I get? Scraps. A pat on the back. It's never been enough, David. David stared at him, the weight of Ryan's words hitting harder than he expected. For a moment, he almost felt pity, but that was quickly overtaken by anger and disbelief. So that's what this is about. Your ego. You think you deserve more. So, instead of talking to me like a partner, you decide to steal from me? You've been plotting this for over a year, Ryan. A year. While I trusted you. Ryan interrupted, his tone laced with venom. Don't act like you're some kind of saint, David. You've always been too busy basking in the spotlight to notice what's really going on. Someone had to think ahead. Someone had to make the hard decisions. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor as he loomed over Ryan. His voice was low and deliberate, but every word carried the weight of betrayal. Hard decisions? You mean fraud, lies, and betrayal? You didn't just betray me, Ryan. You betrayed everyone who believed in us, our employees, our clients. And for what? To satisfy your greed. Ryan's smirk returned, but this time it was colder, more menacing. Call it greed if you want. I call it survival. You were too blind to see the cracks forming in this company, too caught up in playing the hero to realize the empire you built is only standing because I held it together. If I didn't take control, this place would crumble, and you know it. David shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. You really believe that, don't you? That you're the savior in all of this. But you're not. You're a coward, Ryan. A thief. And I won't let you get away with it. Ryan's confidence faltered, just for a moment, as David's words landed. But he quickly masked it, leaning back with an air of defiance. And what are you going to do, David? Fire me? Drag this through the courts? By the time you finish, the company will be in ruins, and you'll be the one left holding the pieces. David's expression darkened, his anger finally boiling over. You're wrong. I already froze the accounts. Every single one. And I've got all the evidence, every transfer, every conversation. You're finished, Ryan. For the first time, true fear flickered across Ryan's face. He opened his mouth to respond, but David didn't give him the chance. You thought you could outplay me? After everything we've been through, you should have known better. David's voice was steady, his confidence unshakable. You're going to answer for this, Ryan. Not just to me, but to everyone you've betrayed. This ends now. Ryan stood abruptly, his chair tipping back slightly. He was cornered, and he knew it. But instead of pleading or apologizing, he spat out one last attempt at defiance. You're making a mistake, David. This isn't over. David watched him storm out, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. He turned back to the desk, picking up his phone to call Julian. It's done, David said firmly. Get the legal team ready. Ryan won't get another chance to hurt this company or anyone else. As he hung up, David allowed himself a moment to breathe. The betrayal still stung, but the battle wasn't over yet. He had fought too hard to build this company, and he wasn't about to let Ryan tear it all apart. This was war, and David intended to win. Ryan's voice turned sharp, his frustration bubbling into anger. This isn't about stealing, it's about fairness. I've put just as much into this company as you, but you're the one everyone respects, the one they admire. And me, I'm just a guy working in the shadows, picking up the scraps. I'm done playing second fiddle, David. David's anger erupted, his voice cutting through Ryan's outburst. Fairness? You think stealing millions and betraying me is fair? You've been scheming for over a year, undermining everything we've built. I trusted you, Ryan. If you felt overlooked, we could have talked about restructuring, about giving you the credit you deserved. But instead, you chose this, deceit and betrayal. Ryan's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing with resentment. Talk. Let's not kid ourselves. You would have nodded, made empty promises, and then gone back to basking in the glory. I've been standing in your shadow for years, David. This was my only way out, my chance to finally get what I deserve. David's voice dropped, laced with disappointment. What you deserve, what you've earned is my trust, my loyalty, but you threw that all away. Your insecurities have destroyed everything, Ryan. Not just our partnership, but the bond we once had. And now, you're going to pay the price for it. Ryan leaned forward, his tone bitter and challenging. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about you. This is about survival. Do you have any idea how it feels to build something and get nothing in return? To watch someone else take the credit while you stay invisible? David's resolve solidified as he stood, glaring down at Ryan. Survival? You were never invisible, Ryan. I trusted you to handle the toughest challenges because I believed in you. But this is greed, not survival. And it's over. I've already frozen the accounts you've been using to funnel money. I have all the evidence, and you'll be lucky if you don't end up in prison. For the first time, fear flickered across Ryan's face. He stood abruptly, his bravado cracking. You froze the accounts? You had no right. His voice rose, laced with panic. You think you've won, don't you? You think cutting me off will stop me? I have connections, David. You can't touch me. David met his gaze, unwavering. Your connections won't save you. You've burned every bridge that mattered, and now you're alone. The law is on my side, Ryan, and so is the truth. You've lost. Ryan's face contorted with rage. You'll regret this. He spat venomously. You'll regret coming after me. David's voice remained calm, but there was steel in his tone. The only thing I regret is trusting you. Now get out of my sight. Ryan stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving David standing in the empty room. The silence was deafening, but David felt a weight lift from his chest. It was done. The betrayal had been confronted, the damage controlled, but at what cost? The man he once called his friend was now his enemy. David sat alone in his office, staring out the window as the city lights twinkled in the distance. The enormity of the day's events pressed down on him. Ryan's betrayal wasn't just a professional blow. It was personal. Years of trust, shattered in a single moment. As he wrestled with the emotions swirling inside him, the door opened quietly. Emily stepped in, her expression filled with concern. She hesitated before speaking. David, is everything okay? David looked up, her presence momentarily grounding him. It's done. Ryan's gone. But it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels empty. Emily walked over and sat down across from him. Her eyes were soft, understanding. You did the right thing, David. You stopped him before he could ruin everything. That's what matters. David sighed, his voice heavy. I should have seen it coming. I should have known. But I didn't, because I trusted him. And now I don't. Her place at the table. One day, David called her into his office for a private meeting. As she walked in, the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast a warm glow on the room. The space exuded success and confidence, qualities Emily now associated with David. Have a seat, Emily, David said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Emily sat, her heart racing with anticipation. Although she had grown comfortable in the company, being alone with David still gave her a mix of excitement and nerves. He wasn't just her boss. He was the man who had taken a chance on her, believed in her, and given her a second shot at life. David leaned back in his chair, a rare smile lighting up his usually serious expression. I've been reviewing your work over the past few weeks, and I have to say, I'm impressed. Emily's eyes widened. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. That means a lot. You've done more than just impress me, he continued, his tone shifting to something more earnest. You've brought a fresh perspective to the team. Your ability to identify potential issues before they arise has saved us more than once. You've shown leadership qualities I didn't even know you had. Emily's breath hitched. Leadership? She had never thought of herself as a leader, but hearing those words from David stirred something within her, a mix of pride and disbelief. David's smile grew. I want to give you a bigger role in the company. We're launching an expansion into a new market, and I want you to lead the project." Her heart raced. "Me? A leadership position? Are you sure I'm ready for that?" David leaned forward, his voice filled with conviction. "Emily, I wouldn't offer you this if I wasn't confident in your abilities. You've earned this. You have the skills, the vision, and the work ethic to make this project a success." Emily hesitated, the enormity of the opportunity weighing on her. But as she met David's gaze, she saw unwavering faith in her. It was enough to push away her self-doubt. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady with determination. "I won't let you down." David leaned back, satisfied. "I know you won't. Let's get started next week. For now, take the weekend to relax. You've earned it." As she left his office, Emily's mind buzzed with excitement. Leading a major project? It was an incredible responsibility, but she was ready. Over the next few weeks, Emily dove headfirst into her new role. She worked closely with David and Sandra to develop a comprehensive strategy for the expansion. The project involved entering international markets, a bold move that could significantly boost the company's revenue. But with the opportunity came challenges: navigating local regulations, understanding cultural nuances, and mitigating financial risks. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, Emily felt energized. Each day brought new obstacles, and she thrived in the fast-paced environment. Her natural intelligence and fresh perspective became the team's secret weapon. During one meeting, she suggested a strategy to optimize distribution channels in the new market, a suggestion so innovative it left the room in stunned silence before erupting into agreement. David, who was present, looked at her with a proud smile. "You just saved us millions, Emily." One evening, as the day's meetings wrapped up, David caught Emily by the windows overlooking the city. The skyline glittered under the setting sun, casting a golden glow on both of them. "Emily," David began, his tone unusually reflective. She turned to face him, curious. "I've been thinking about everything we've accomplished in the past few months," he said. "Ryan's betrayal, the steps we took to protect the company, and now this expansion. None of it would have been possible without you." Emily blinked, startled by the weight of his words. "I'm just doing my part," she said modestly. David shook his head. "No, you've done more than that. You've proven you're not just an employee. You're a leader. And I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done." Emily felt a lump in her throat. When she had first stepped into this world, she had doubted herself at every turn. But now, standing here with David, hearing his gratitude and belief in her, she felt a sense of pride she had never known before. "Thank you," she said softly. David smiled. "The future is bright, Emily. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can achieve together." As they stood there, watching the city lights come to life, Emily knew this was just the beginning. The challenges ahead didn't scare her, they excited her. For the first time in a long time, she believed in herself. Over the next few months, Emily's project transformed the company's future. She led her team with confidence, navigating setbacks with grace and celebrating victories with humility. The expansion was a resounding success, and Emily's name became synonymous with innovation and leadership within the company. And as David watched her thrive, he knew he had made the right choice. Emily wasn't just a rising star, she was the future of the company. And for Emily, this was only the beginning. The expansion project under Emily's leadership was progressing faster than anyone anticipated. With David's guidance and Emily's unrelenting determination, the company was making remarkable strides toward breaking into the international market. Challenges arose daily, but Emily thrived in the chaos, turning each obstacle into an opportunity to shine. However, just as they began to savor the sweet taste of success, an unexpected shadow from the past loomed Ryan. David hadn't thought about Ryan for months. After their last confrontation, he assumed his former friend had left quietly, consumed by legal battles and disgrace. But one morning, as David stepped into his office, a stern-faced security officer stood waiting at his door. "Mr. Sullivan, I think you need to see this," the officer said, handing over a sealed envelope. David frowned, his name scrawled neatly across the front. The weight of the envelope was unusual, almost ominous. He opened it to reveal a USB drive nestled inside. "Who sent this?" David asked, his voice steady but wary. "It was dropped off at the front desk early this morning. No return address. Just your name." David's chest tightened as unease crept in. "Ryan. It had to be." "Thanks," David muttered, dismissing the officer. In the privacy of his office, David locked the door and sat at his desk, the USB drive balanced between his fingers. Should he contact Julian, his investigator, before viewing its contents? Or should he see for himself what Ryan had up his sleeve? After a brief hesitation, David plugged the drive into his computer. A single video file appeared. Heart pounding, he clicked play. The screen flickered to life, revealing a grainy video of Ryan seated in what appeared to be a dimly lit hotel room. His smug grin sent a chill down David's spine. "David," Ryan began, his voice dripping with malice. "By now, you probably think you've won. You froze my accounts, cut me out of the company, and left me with nothing. But let me tell you something. You didn't destroy me. Not by a long shot." David's jaw clenched as Ryan continued, his words like venom. "I've been busy. While you've been playing the role of the righteous CEO, I've been gathering information. Information that could bring your perfect little empire crashing down." Ryan leaned closer to the camera, his smirk widening. "I've made connections, powerful ones. And I'm not just talking about the business world. When the media gets a hold of what I've got, your reputation will be in tatters. Watch the headlines, David. The clock is ticking." The video ended abruptly, leaving David staring at the screen, his heart pounding in his chest. What could Ryan possibly have on him? David had always been meticulous, ensuring his dealings were beyond reproach. But Ryan was cunning, and even the slightest whisper of scandal could wreak havoc. Grabbing his phone, David dialed Julian with urgency. "Julian, we've got a problem," David said, his voice tight. "What's going on?" Julian's tone was calm but immediately alert. "It's Ryan. He sent me a video, threatening to leak something damaging to the media. Says he's been gathering information." Julian paused, then spoke with measured determination. "Send me the video. My team will analyze it and see if we can trace its origin. In the meantime, don't engage with him. Ryan wants you rattled. Stay calm." David nodded, even though Julian couldn't see him. "I'll send it right away." After hanging up, David forwarded the video to Julian, his mind racing. Ryan's reappearance wasn't just an attack on the company. It was personal. That evening, as David sat in his dimly lit office, his thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. "Come in," he called, his voice weary. Emily stepped inside, her expression concerned. "I heard something's going on," she said softly. "Are you okay?" David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's Ryan. He's back, and he's threatening to go public with something damaging. I don't know what he has, but it could ruin everything." Emily's face fell, her worry evident. "I thought he was out of the picture." "So did I," David admitted, his frustration evident. "But I underestimated him. He's playing dirty this time." Emily moved closer, sitting across from him. "Is there anything I can do to help?" David looked at her, a wave of gratitude washing over him. Despite everything, Emily had stood by his side. Her loyalty and resilience had been a constant source of strength. "Just knowing you're here helps more than you realize," David said, his voice softening. Emily's eyes met his, determination flashing in them. "We'll get through this, David. Together." David nodded, her words giving him a renewed sense of purpose. They weren't just fighting for the company. They were fighting for everything they'd built together. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the city, David and Emily began strategizing, determined to outsmart Ryan. The stakes had never been higher, but one thing was certain. They wouldn't go down without a fight. As Emily left his office that evening, David felt the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. Ryan's threat wasn't just a professional challenge, it was personal. It cut deep, testing the foundations of trust, loyalty, and everything David had worked so hard to build. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension and preparation. David barely slept, his mind consumed with the uncertainty of Ryan's next move. Every morning, he scoured the news, bracing himself for the bombshell Ryan had promised. Julian and his team worked tirelessly, analyzing every clue, following every lead. Yet Ryan proved to be a ghost, always one step ahead, always out of reach. Then came the breakthrough. "David, we've got something," Julian said, his voice urgent but steady over the phone late one evening. David sat up in his chair, the tension in his chest tightening. "What is it?" "One of our guys intercepted a message Ryan sent to a media outlet," Julian explained. "He's trying to sell a story, claims he has evidence of financial misconduct tied to your company. Offshore accounts, hidden profits, it's all fabricated. But he's weaving just enough truth into the lies to make it look credible." David's jaw clenched. "So it's a smear campaign." "Exactly," Julian confirmed. "He's desperate, David. He's banking on the media running with it before anyone can verify the facts." A surge of anger coursed through David, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What's our move?" "We're already ahead of him," Julian assured him. "I've reached out to the media outlets he contacted. They've been warned, and we're providing them with irrefutable evidence of Ryan's actions, his theft, the frozen accounts, the betrayal. Once they see the real story, his lies won't stand a chance. And there's more." Julian's tone shifted, a note of triumph creeping in. "We've gathered enough evidence to take legal action. Fraud, defamation, breach of fiduciary duty. We've got him cornered." David leaned back in his chair, the tightness in his chest easing for the first time in days. "So this is it. We can end this." Julian's response was firm. "Yes, this is the beginning of the end for Ryan." The call ended, and David allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. Ryan's attempts to destroy him had been relentless, but they had only strengthened David's resolve. This wasn't just about saving his company or his reputation. It was about standing up to someone who had betrayed him on every level. The next morning, the headlines broke. David's legal team released a detailed statement, exposing Ryan's schemes in full. The media frenzy that followed was swift and unforgiving, but for once, the spotlight wasn't on David. Ryan's name became synonymous with betrayal, greed, and deceit. The very narrative Ryan had tried to spin against David had backfired, leaving him with nowhere to hide. As David watched the news coverage unfold from his office, a soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emily stepped inside, her expression a mix of relief and concern. "I saw the news," she said quietly, crossing the room to stand by his desk. "It looks like everything's finally coming to light." David nodded, his gaze still fixed on the screen. "It's over, at least the worst of it. Ryan's going to have to face the consequences of what he's done." Emily hesitated for a moment before speaking again, her voice gentle. "You've been through so much these past few months. I'm just glad you came out on top." David glanced up at her, the tension in his face softening. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emily. You've been by my side through all of this." Emily smiled, her eyes warm and steady. "I'm just glad I could help." For a moment, silence settled between them, a rare pause in the chaos of the past few months. As David looked at Emily, he felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in a long time. "You've been more than just a help," he said, his voice quieter now. "You've become someone I rely on, someone I trust." Emily's expression softened further, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I feel the same way." David smiled, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the resolution of his professional troubles. It was a different kind of hope, a promise of something new, something worth fighting for beyond the boardroom. The days that followed marked the beginning of a new chapter. With Ryan's legal battles underway and his reputation irreparably damaged, David could finally breathe again. But more importantly, he found himself looking forward to the future, not just for his company, but for the growing bond he shared with Emily. As the city lights flickered outside his office window one evening, David stood beside Emily, the tension of the past months fading into the background. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. With Emily by his side, he could face anything. As David extended his hand toward Emily, a warm smile graced his face. "You know," he said, his tone light but sincere, "we make a pretty good team." Emily laughed softly, the sound like a breath of fresh air after the storm they had weathered together. I think so too, she replied, her eyes shining with quiet confidence. The tension that had gripped them over the past weeks melted away, replaced by a rare sense of peace and closure. Ryan had tried his best to tear them apart, to unravel everything David had built, but in the end, his actions had only strengthened the bond between them. David stood up and gestured toward the door. Let's get back to work. We've got a lot to look forward to. Emily nodded, reaching for his outstretched hand. Absolutely. Together, they stepped out of the office, their steps purposeful, ready to face whatever challenges the future held. With Ryan's defeat behind them, the company began to regain its rhythm. The media had moved on to its next big story, and the legal battles against Ryan progressed steadily. David felt a sense of closure he hadn't thought possible just weeks earlier. The storm had passed, and now he could focus on what truly mattered: the future of his company and the people who had stood by him unwaveringly. Emily, especially, had risen to every challenge with grace and determination. The expansion project she had taken on was nearing completion, and her sharp analytical mind and ability to think beyond the immediate problems had earned her widespread respect across the organization. What had once been admiration for her hard work had grown into something more. To David, Emily wasn't just an invaluable member of his team. She was someone he trusted implicitly, someone who had become an irreplaceable part of his life. One afternoon, as Emily wrapped up a meeting with the international team, David called her into his office. She walked in, her usual bright smile lighting up the room. "You wanted to see me?" she asked, taking a seat across from his desk. David leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through these past few months," he began, his voice calm but serious. "And I've realized that I owe you more than just a thank you." Emily tilted her head, a flicker of curiosity crossing her face. "You've already done so much, David. I don't expect anything more." "That's exactly what makes you special," David said warmly, leaning forward. "You've never expected anything in return, even when you've gone above and beyond. Not just for me, but for the company. And it's time we recognize that." A sense of anticipation built inside Emily as she listened, her heart beating just a little faster. "I want to offer you a permanent leadership role," David said, his tone steady but filled with conviction. "You've proven you're more than capable of handling high-level responsibilities. It's time you had a seat at the executive table. I'd like you to oversee our international operations as part of the senior management team." For a moment, Emily was speechless. Her journey with the company had begun as an outsider, a waitress warning David of a betrayal she had overheard. She had never imagined that her actions that day would lead to this moment. "You mean a permanent leadership role?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. David nodded. "Yes, you've shown everyone, myself included, that you're more than qualified. Your ideas, your innovation, your leadership, they've made this company stronger. I can't think of anyone better suited for the job." Tears pricked the corners of Emily's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is more than I ever imagined." David smiled, his warmth and admiration evident. "You've earned every bit of it, Emily. This isn't just about what you've done for me. It's about what you've brought to this company. You've made us better." Emily took a deep breath, her heart full of gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for this opportunity," she said, her voice steadier now. "I promise I'll do everything I can to live up to it." David's smile widened. "I have no doubt that you will. And don't worry, you won't be doing it alone. We'll be working closely together, just like we have been. I'm excited to see what we can accomplish." Emily nodded, her confidence growing. She had worked hard for this, but she also knew she hadn't done it alone. With David's unwavering belief in her and the lessons she had learned along the way, she felt ready to take on this new challenge. The weeks that followed marked a turning point for both David and Emily. The company thrived under their combined leadership, and the expansion project Emily had spearheaded was lauded as one of the most successful initiatives in its history. But beyond the professional victories, something deeper had shifted between them. In quiet moments, like when they shared a late-night coffee after hours or exchanged knowing glances during meetings, David began to realize that his feelings for Emily went beyond admiration or respect. And as Emily caught herself looking forward to those small moments of connection, she wondered if David felt the same. For now, though, they focused on the work ahead, building a stronger future for the company and for the partnership that had grown between them. Together, they were unstoppable. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What's your score? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to catch all our stories. For more emotional tales, click here on the end screen.